yesterday. They're going to go get their Letterman jackets again. The Indianapolis Colts are 2-6 against the Titans since Pat McAfee came up here and did his wrestling announcement. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, they haven't had back-to-back winning seasons since I was a senior in high school.
What's up, Titans fans, and welcome to another edition of Titans Global Podcast, a Blue Box production. I'm your host, Maximus Titan Fan, and as always with me is my good friend, Link. What's up, buddy?
What's going on, guys? Good to see everybody. I'm a little sick tonight, but we're going to get through this together. I know my boy Maximus has got this, and you guys can help me out by commenting, by liking, by subscribing. We want to get you involved in the conversation. We do this for you guys, and let's get into some Titans football.
Right on. Well, it's always easier to do these shows when we win.
Absolutely.
So that's nice. And we also got to spoil the Jags days, which again was nice and sweet. And like he said, man, if you're watching us now, go check us out on YouTube, like and subscribe. That would really help us out. That's the best way to help us. And like I said, we had a really great game. We really did. I don't know where this team was all year, but I'm glad we showed up at least to ruin the Jags day.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Tannehill, was Ryan Tannehill. Pretty average, 17 to 26, 168, 2 touchdowns and an interception, 93 rating. Not much to talk about there. What's up, Corey? However, there is a lot to talk about in the running back game. Derrick Henry, 19 for 153, a 8.1 yard average, and a touchdown, a 69-yard long. The King in what could be his final game.
He showed up and showed out. It was a huge day for him, and I know people don't want to see him go, but if you got to go, that's a heck of a way to do it.
I was going to say, if you're going to go out, that is the way to go out. I mean, just like Peyton Manning did in the Super Bowl, man, you win the Super Bowl and you retire, and that's the way these sports legends are supposed to end their career. Derrick Henry, I don't think your career's over yet, so no. I don't blame you for moving on, but I also don't blame the Titans for moving on as well. If you look at the amazing game that Derrick Henry had in rushing, Tyjae Spears only got 3 carries, and he had a better yard per carry average than Henry did, which is insane when you think about it.
Yep. Now, granted, I will say one of those 3 carries was his 22-yard run, but to me, that 22-yard run shows you what Tyjae Spears can be. He's just a different weapon than Derrick Henry is at this point in his career. The way that he's able to slide between tacklers, the way that he's able to get outside, burst through the line, get outside the numbers, it just – again, I'm super happy Derrick Henry had a great game, but I feel like we've learned more about what Tyjae Spears could be this year than what Derrick Henry can be going forward. And I'm super excited to see what this kid does in the future.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Tyjae Spears as well. And I do understand, why they're moving on, but I do have to say, this is the first time in a long time that I've felt this way about a player. I think the last time I actually felt this way about a player was when McNair got snubbed and the awful treatment of him. But, it's the first time Derrick Henry could be not a Titan. And to be honest, I just don't see it. So let's just talk about what he's done here. We touched on it a little bit last week, but 9,349 rushing yards, 10,844 from scrimmage, 106 touchdowns, 4.7 yards per carry. That's almost a 5 yard per carry for his career. It's amazing. 106 touchdowns, which is a Titans franchise record. 4 Pro Bowls. The most 100-yard rushing games in Titans franchise history, just passed Earl Campbell with the last performance last week.
Yep.
And he has the 2,000-yard season, of course. So I am deeming him the greatest running back in the Titans franchise or Oilers franchise history, whatever you want to call us. I think he actually does take over Earl Campbell. I think he is a Hall of Famer. And one out to you, man.
Yeah, and I can't stress this enough. 2 things I want to point out. One, his first 2 years in the league, it was 2 starts per season. So you can essentially argue that he missed out on 2 years of more stats. Now, I know he came in and they wanted to see what they had in him, and granted, I get that. The other thing I want to point out, though, is Derrick Henry has done this in a predominantly passing league. When you look back at Eddie George, when you look back at Earl Campbell, it almost seems like back then the run-heavy offense was a little more dominant in the NFL. Derrick Henry's done this and had success in it in a league where you're seeing teams transition to the passing game a lot more. And that to me just speaks volumes to who he is and his work ethic, and what he's been able to accomplish for this team. So good on him. And again, I hate to see him go, but I hope he comes back and retires as a Titan if this was his last year.
Yeah, man. And when I said he has the most 100-yard rushing games, that's 37. 37, y'all.
Yep.
There's a reason they call him the king. And we're going to give him a little shout out, just exactly the way he did it at the game. Which actually, the first time I watched this, I got a little emotional, but here we go.
Titan fans, I just want to say thank you for the greatest 8 years of my life, the ups and the downs. Y'all been there for everything, through the adversity, watching me grow as a person and a player, always supporting me. I love y'all. I love seeing the 22s in the stadium. Hopefully I was an inspiration to all the young kids and everybody in the community. Just thank y'all so much. Man, God is good, and tighten up, baby.
Nothing left to be said. Ladies and gentlemen, Derrick Henry, the king.
The king, indeed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Powerful stuff happening Sunday.
Yeah.
In other news, DeAndre Hopkins did well, even though Tannehill started. Got 2 contract bonuses, 1 for receptions and 1 for yardage. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I will say there's one thing I wanted to point out that I just saw earlier. During Tannehill's last press conference, I don't know if it was at locker cleanout or just after the game. I'd have to look back. I can't remember. But he said he basically went rogue to make sure that DeAndre Hopkins was getting the ball and getting his targets. So I know we're about to talk about DeAndre Hopkins, and we'll send Tannehill his farewell when the time comes. But that just goes to show you, I mean, some of these guys, I mean, they're close, and they understand incentives, and they understand how important it is. I actually watched a video from – it was Ray Lewis when he was on the Ravens, and when he hit all his incentives and he's dancing on the field, and it just it kind of makes me feel good. And I know these guys make a killing when they get out on an NFL field, but just to have that love for each other, to know where each other's at, and say, hey man, I got you this game. I just love that about it. Absolutely love it.
Absolutely. And Brandon, you know, I thought about this. Mm-hmm. And I made an earlier statement. Me and Link were actually talking before the show, and I made a statement that I didn't think that DeAndre Hopkins would get his incentives if Will Levis didn't start. Mm-hmm. And Link asked me what were the stats on that, and I didn't know, so I had to go look it up. It was just a gut feeling. And when I looked it up, it was pretty easy. Let's see, Ryan Tannehill in 9 games, he had 43 receptions, 514 yards, and 1 touchdown. So he might have got that reception bonus, but there's no way he was going to get the yardage or the touchdown bonus for sure. Levis in 8 games, Hopkins had 32 receptions, 543 yards, and 6 touchdowns. My argument is, if Levis would have had 1 or 2 more games, he would have got all his incentives.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I mean, numbers don't lie. It's kind of as simple as that. Now, I do think that Levis at times, he definitely targeted Hopkins more. But that being said, it felt like they had more of a chemistry than him and Ryan Tannehill did. To me, it just seemed, and I know there were times this season where they were just on 2 totally separate pages, but it felt like the majority of the time, Levis knew where Hopkins was going to be. And I feel like on the sidelines, Hopkins has been a huge help to Levis, coaching him up, just being that elite receiver to say, hey, when you see this, look at me here. And I think that's really going to help him going forward. I feel like every rookie that comes into this league really needs that elite receiver that can kind of coach them along, because it's one thing to have a great quarterback coach. It's another thing to have a receiver of Hopkins' caliber who has played in big moments, who's played with some, I mean, let's be honest, he's played with some decent quarterbacks. So, yeah, I think that's important for him going forward next year, and I'm excited to see how that works out.
I agree, man. Really excited for Hopkins that he got those incentives. And, yeah, like you said, I'm really encouraged on next year. A lot of people said he was washed when he came to Tennessee, and this is where, old wide receivers come to die and all that mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
But, he proved a lot of that to be wrong. So I'm excited to see what he does next year.
Yep. Yeah, he kind of broke the curse, it feels like. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with people when the talk started because, I mean, we've seen Julio Jones, we've seen Randy Moss, we've seen Andre Johnson, and I know those guys at some point or another, they had success, but, man, it just feels like Hopkins feels like he's really still got it, and he's been a huge part of this Titans offense for however good it was. He's been a huge part of it.
Yeah, man, totally agree with that. In other news on the receiving point, Tyjae Spears had 3 receptions for 41 yards, along with his 25 rushing. And Chig actually showed up a little bit with 2 receptions for 36 yards. And Chris Moore, 3 for 30. Not bad. Had a bad brick hand drop, but, just ice over that. We won. We ruined the Jags playoffs.
Yeah.
That was enough for me. To be honest, a lot of people on social media were mad that we won because they wanted a better draft pick, which I get. I get it. I understand where you're coming from. But it was worth it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, especially when, I don't know if you guys saw it, but a couple months ago, it may have just been 1 month ago, but Jacksonville was tweeting where to go ahead and buy your playoff tickets, and it just aged like milk. So just really nice, and it kind of came full circle after last year. What we had to go through when they knocked us out of the playoffs in the last game, it came full circle, and, man, it feels good because I hate the Jags. I just hate them.
Yeah, man, to be honest, I'm going to bash on the Jags a little bit, but to be honest, I did not know they had that many fans until last offseason. Yeah, and then they all came at me like nukes out.
Yeah.
Talking mad smack. And I was like, you do know you beat a guy that just came here like 2 weeks ago as our quarterback. Half our defense was injured.
Yeah.
There was some really dicey calls in the game.
Yep.
And then we just go smash them with old Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, just doing the thing we used to do.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say this too: if you were at the game on Sunday, credit to you. I saw a lot of videos of Jags fans flying in, and you could tell in the stadium there was a lot of Jags fans there. Credit to the Titans because it was loud. I mean, you Titans fans that showed up, I know it wasn't super cold, but it definitely wasn't a enjoyable day to sit there at a game for a few hours. But they were loud. They got into the game. There was some moments where Jacksonville was having trouble. There was just a blatant delay of game where they could not get it figured out, and I credit the fans for a lot of that. So keep doing what you're doing going into 2024. That's so important for these home games. I mean, and at one point this season we were undefeated at home. So just keep doing what you're doing, keep showing up, and keep hitting them.
Yeah, man, that definitely makes a difference. Definitely.
Yep.
And besides, it's just more fun for
Absolutely.
everybody that way.
Absolutely.
I used to hate going to games like 10 years ago when 3/4 of the stadium was the opposing team.
Yeah.
And you were always sitting next to a bunch of people from the opposing team. It didn't matter which side you were on. It's like, damn it.
Yep.
But enough of that. Off to the defense of what we did in the game. I have to credit my man. I always talk about the tackle leader. Not that it makes great defensive players. It's not all there is to being a defensive player, but Al Shire, 10 tackles. Yet again, man is on fire. Roger McCreary had a great game. 9 tackles, 1 pass defended. Sean Murphy Bunting had an amazing game, even though he did get burned once or twice, but he still had an amazing game. 8 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, a pass defend, and an interception.
Yep.
Elijah Molden had a decent game, but Kayvon Wallace, man, again.
Keep showing up.
Yeah, we got to resign this dude if he's not in a contract for 2024, which I'm pretty sure he's not. So we need to get this man back under contract. Even if he's a backup, he's an amazing backup. And Terrell Edmonds came up big.
Oh.
Interception. Where is this Titan team been? And by the way, Scoob, my man, we were just talking about the Titans being at the game. I know you were there, man. Tighten up, baby. You were the ones we were talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, to get back to Edmonds, though, I mean, what a heads-up play. I mean, absolutely incredible heads-up play. And I've been harking on him the last, it's got to be 4 or 5 weeks about how they just can't seem to come up with interceptions. And then they come into this game and they get 2. I mean, it seems like they're always kind of in the right place and have their opportunity. I'm not going to say always in the right place, but they've had their opportunities and not made the most of it. And it just felt like, for whatever reason, on Sunday, guys like Edmonds, guys like Bunting, I mean, they were just locked in. So whatever that coaching staff said to them before the game, it worked. But again, just great heads up play by those guys, especially Edmonds. That catch he made was, I mean, that's impressive for a wide receiver, much less a corner. So, hey, I would argue that he had a better game than Kevin Byard did for the Eagles. But here we are. So, yeah.
I wasn't going to go there.
I mean,
you're not wrong, but I still wasn't going to go there.
Yep.
Yeah, had a great game. Him and Sean Murphy Bunting, heads up, man. That's what we've been missing all game is the turnovers. We just got to win the turnover battle. Our turnover margin is terrible.
Yep.
Absolutely terrible. And that's really what wins and loses games in the NFL.
Yep.
Special teams, man. I mean, Nick Folk is great, man. Again, I need to look at his contract. I haven't looked at it yet. I haven't done my we're doing our off-season show next week, but if they don't have him on a contract, they need to sign him again.
Yeah, something I'm going to bring up, and I've got to double check this. I know I haven't looked at it since this week ended, but I know last week, and I didn't want to spoil anything or jinx anything. If I'm not mistaken, he set the franchise record for field goal percentage this year, which is kind of crazy to think about. Now, I know he took a lot of attempts, and you want to convert a lot of those field goals into touchdowns, and there was some short yardage stuff. But credit to him. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he now holds the franchise record for kick percentage.
I don't know, but that's a juicy stat.
Yeah.
And either way, I've been impressed with Nick Folk and y'all hear me say it all the time. It's about consistency when you're in the NFL. If you can't be a consistent, available, good player in the NFL, then I don't want you on my team.
Yep.
And that's what he's been. So, yeah, that's freaking sweet. So, to move on, we do have to talk about a little bit of a rumor mill that's going around.
Ooh.
Mike Vrabel. It's the white elephant in the room. Everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to hear about it. I don't really want to talk about it. Okay, I talked about it last week on the show. Just kind of putting the question out there of, is Mike Vrabel everything we thought he was? I don't know. I was just in the questioning phase. Mm-hmm. Apparently, we're not just in the questioning phase, because I saw the Schultz report come out, and then I saw the Schefter report come out, and it really looks like Mike Vrabel might not be the head coach of the Tennessee Titans in 2024.
Yeah, the one that got me, I didn't give, again, it's worth noting, I didn't give a lot of attention to the Schultz one, just because he is a little more biased. However, when the Schefter came out, I believe it was on the Pat McAfee show, when he came out and started talking about it and just his thoughts. And I mean, everybody knows he's got a lot of inside information. It just seemed like where there's smoke, there's fire. It's what it seemed like to me. And I mean, there's reports coming out now that it's not, that it may be a fact that it could be Vrabel's decision. I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of stuff. However, I will say it's really tough to sift through all the bullcrap at this point. I mean, we're 1 day away removed from the end of the season, and I don't think anything's going to change until at least a few weeks, maybe a month or so.
I think you're right on that. I think the news will move a little slower than the rumors have.
Yeah.
The rumors just caught up quick to it.
Yeah.
However, when you hear that many rumors, you start to wonder how much of it is true.
Yep.
And like you said, where there's smoke, there's fire.
That's right.
And he's made, statements about it. This is hilarious, by the way. But it's true. He might. I made the joke about, Tannehill starting in New England next year for Mike Vrabel. It was a joke, but I made the joke because I had the thought. But when you think about it in like perspective, okay, we've seen, when you look at all the clues, like I said, when you look at Mike Vrabel's interviews, you got to read between the lines. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you don't get anything. Mm-hmm. And he had an issue with starting Levis.
Yep.
That was clear. And he did not. Now they're saying that there's a rift between him and Rand, or that's the rumor anyway, is that there's a rift between him and Rand.
Yep.
Well, if there's a rift between him and Rand, it would be that Rand chose Will Levis, in my opinion. I don't know.
Seems that way to me.
It's all speculation, man. Yep. All speculation.
Yep.
And the fact that he's just unwilling to hire someone that's not his best friend.
Yep, I agree. And again, this is just completely what I read into it. I don't know anything. I don't have any inside information. But it just feels like to me that when Rand Carthon was hired, I don't know if that's necessarily the guy Vrabel wanted. And that came from Adam Schefter. I mean, even Adam Schefter talked about that. It seemed like he may have wanted to go a different direction, maybe with Cowden. Now I will say this. I feel like, and again, this is all me here. It seems to me like Vrabel probably wanted CJ Stroud. That was his first choice, and rightfully so. I mean that was the best talent coming out of the draft. I get that. But something else just kind of keeps telling me that he was willing to do whatever it took to move up and get CJ Stroud. And maybe Rand Carthon wasn't exactly on board with that. And he's looking at Will Levis saying, well, I think this guy could be our guy for the next 5-6 years just because of his metrics, what he's able to do. His sheer size is impressive in itself. So I feel like that could have been the start of something. And then once Tannehill was injured, Vrabel really didn't have a choice. He had to start Levis, and then once we saw what Levis was able to do, he still was left with no choice. Now, I say all this, but we have to remember, too, I've seen these guys hug. Will Levis has had nothing but good things to say about Mike Vrabel, talking about, how they've got a relationship and how he's been a great mentor for him. But that's also the kind of guy that Levis is. He's not the type, I feel like, to air his dirty laundry out to the press, to the media, and we definitely know Mike Vrabel's not that guy. So we'll see what happens. I mean, eventually there is going to be a meeting, and we'll see where it goes. But man, wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall in that meeting just to hear what's being said between those people? I mean, it's going to be wild. So we'll see what happens and where it goes. But at this point, he's not as safe as I would have thought he was last week. I'll say that.
I'll say this real quick before I say the next piece I want to, but first and a third.
You have to, right? I mean, you have to. Here's what scares me about that. If you're going to go through a coaching change, it's better to do it early. And most teams aren't going to look at trading for a coach until closer to draft time. That's just kind of what it seems like, because they want to be able to sit down with each other. They want to really be able to evaluate the college talent coming out. They want to wait till the combine to see some information. So it's like, do we really want to give up our first and third for a coach in this league? And I know Robert Kraft and Mike Vrabel have this awesome relationship. But that's the only thing that scares me, because if there is a trade, I feel like it's going to come later in the process. And I don't want to be in that position where we're trying to throw together a coaching staff right there before the draft, if that makes sense.
I agree with you, and I don't want to be in that situation. However, I do think that there would be a decent demand for Mike Vrabel. I don't think there would be a high demand, but I do think there would be at least 2 to 3 teams that would be coming after him that we would be able to leverage against each other to make a better deal than what we would initially get if there was only one option.
Yep. And everybody knows the first team. I mean, it's the Patriots. Again, him and Kraft's relationship. And then remember, too, this is the same guy that during the bye week, he flew to New England to sit in Robert Kraft's press box and watch the game right beside him. And that's taking time. I know it's a bye week, but you're still taking time away from your team, time away from your prep. And we don't know what kind of conversations they were having. And at that point, we weren't – Belichick's job probably wasn't on the line to the extent that it is now. But there were definitely conversations happening. I mean, there had to be. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel like in the beginning of the season when they were having turmoils, I think that the Patriots brass were thinking, well, maybe we just take down his level of control, maybe bring in a GM. That way he's not doing everything. That kind of thing with Belichick, because you don't want to give up on a coach after he's, been there for that long. But at the same time, just what I was saying last week, how much of that success is catered to actually Bill Belichick being a great coach, and how much of that success is catered to Tom Brady being on his squad.
Yep.
But at the same time, I don't want to say too much bad about Mike Vrabel or too much about this being traded.
Right.
Because it's much like that conversation you have with your best friend when he breaks up with his girl and you talk shit about her.
Yeah.
And, then they get back together like 2 weeks later and you're like, oh, wow, this is awkward.
Yeah.
My bad. So, I'm not going to say too much about Mike Vrabel, but yeah, there we go. Personally, I think the smoke has turned into fire already, but.
Yeah, and again, guys, there's going to be plenty of time to talk about this. I don't think a decision is going to be made anytime soon. There's going to be a lot of evaluations, a lot of meetings. I will say, though, we're talking about the Patriots. Is there another team you feel like would go all in for? That was mine too. Yep, I completely agree.
So yeah, I mean,
Washington.
It just makes sense, man. I mean, they're trying to change their image. They're trying to do everything new. They want to bring in some guy that's going to bring in a culture, which we know Mike Vrabel already has. So, I mean, everything just kind of, fits into place just like a Tetris piece. So, I mean, those are the 2 biggest bidding wars, I think, for Mike Vrabel.
Let me ask you this, and we didn't even talk about this in the pre-show. If let's take one of those picks. Let's say they offer a 2nd and a 5th, but Belichick is packaged into that.
No.
Even as
unless he's
even
just a
even as a
defensive
coordinator. Even
Now,
as a
okay.
defensive coordinator.
Now, if he's willing to be our defensive coordinator,
Uh-huh. You thinking about it?
yeah, no, I'm thinking about it.
I personally, and again, Schefter touched on this a little bit. Personally, I think he might be at the point where he's ready to take a small step back. And it wouldn't shock me. We always talk about how Vrabel wants his guys. Wouldn't it be insane if something happened with Belichick, Vrabel wasn't fired, and you had Vrabel and Belichick here? Would you like that?
No,
Really?
no.
You think it'd be a headbutt?
Yes.
Okay.
And simply because, man, Belichick might want to take a step back, but let's be honest, man, when you've had control of something like that for that
He wouldn't be
long,
able to.
it's really hard to take a step back,
Yep.
especially when you're taking not only a step back from being a head coach / GM to being a head coach, but a head coach / GM to being a defensive coordinator.
That's true.
Now you have a couple different people to answer to. I don't know. I just really feel like I don't think Belichick would put himself in that position. I think he would probably retire before he would do something.
Okay. And let me ask you this, just to transition a little bit. I've seen a lot of talk about Arthur Smith. Where's your thoughts there?
Well, if anybody follows me on social media, they already know my thoughts.
Yep.
Because I've been blasting it all over Twitter, and I did put up 1 or 2 posts on Facebook about it. But yes, I think bringing Arthur Smith back would be a good service to the offense, and simply because people don't understand exactly how good of a line scheme he had. His offensive line was way better than Tim Kelly, and that's really Tim Kelly's only shortcoming that I see as an offensive coordinator, is that he doesn't have very good line scheming. His line scheming is kind of terrible, if I'm being honest.
Yep.
But that's why everybody has so much success against our offensive line. It's not really the offensive line coaches. I mean, yes, our offensive line is a little, the players are a little below average, but it's a lot of the scheme.
Yep.
And to be honest, that was what made Arthur Smith so amazing, is he would run the same plays out of the same formation, make it a run play to the left where he's pulling a guard, and then he does the same thing, except it's a play action with a bootleg to the left instead of the running back. I mean, the man was genius at it. That's what made him so good. But again, you have to have a run game for that to work. So it's proper personnel. Maybe that's why he didn't work out in Atlanta.
I think so too.
But I also have the argument of maybe he didn't work out in Atlanta because he's not meant to be a head coach. Again, when you're a head coach, it's completely different from being a coordinator.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing as being a GM. When you're a coordinator, you can point your finger at the coach and say, well, he's the one who asked me to do this play. That's why I called the play that I did. It's all his fault. And you can even bargain that against like future jobs and stuff to get yourself further in the NFL. But if you're the head coach, you can't really say that. If you're the GM, you can't really say, well, he was the guy, who asked me for this guy. No, you're the GM. You make the picks.
Yep.
So,
yeah. I think a good example of that was somebody like, was it Bill O'Brien who got fired and then took that demotion, and then he
destroyed, man.
And he had he had some success as a coordinator. I mean, we saw that happen. So again, it's one of those situations. I think Arthur Smith is a great-minded guy. I wouldn't mind seeing him here. I would definitely take him over Kelly at this point, if I'm just being completely honest. I feel like Kelly, and we've talked about the gadget plays that he's able to come up with. I think he's great at those, but I just feel like Arthur Smith is a more well-rounded type of offensive mind. And I could be wrong, but that's kind of how it seems to me. Just like you were talking about with the blocking schemes. I mean, it just seems like he's got it a little bit more under control when he's not having to deal with the day-to-day operations, and he can just focus on the offense.
Yeah, I wish I could remember his name, but the offensive coordinator, we're actually seeing it play out right now, but the offensive coordinator from New England, who is touted as one of the best offensive coordinators out there, blah, 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 blah. He's a head coach now. I think is it New England? Or not New England, Las Vegas, I think he's the head coach. Anyway, it's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. It's the exact same thing, man. You can be a great coordinator. What was the other guy from New England? Defensive coordinator, went on to do the Lions. He's terrible as a head coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Great defensive coordinator. Wade Phillips, terrible as a head coach. Great defensive coordinator.
Yep.
That's the thing, man. You can be a great defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator. You can be a terrible head coach.
Yep.
That's just the way. It's hard.
It can work opposite too. I mean, I feel like his name escapes me. You're gonna have to help me out. The OC who went on to Green Bay. I feel like
Mike
that's
LaFleur.
that's a good example of a guy who maybe he's not the best at a coordinator position, but because of player personnel and what he's able to do, he makes a better head coach. And I'm not saying the guy's elite or a world beater, but I mean, it's kind of hard to argue that, especially here in this system when he was here, he's a better head coach than he was a coordinator. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that, to be honest. He's done very well for himself as a head coach. I'll give you that. And we were talking about this in the pregame. Who's ever heard of a flea flicker tight end screen?
It's wild. Absolutely wild.
I jumped out of my chair when I saw it. I mean, I was sitting on the couch, but still, I jumped off the seat and was like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
I was so surprised.
Again, it's the gadget plays. It feels like the gadget play. And that's what works for him. And the only problem I see with that is, and I'm not taking away what he did this last game, I feel like the play calling was better, but I also feel like your performers performed better, if that makes sense. So I don't credit all of it to play calling this last week. But he's got what it takes, and we've seen some crazy stuff from him. I just don't know if he's the type of coach I want calling your first, second, and third down. Just your average script NFL plays. It feels like there's a disconnect between him and the players, between him and the quarterback. I don't know, and I don't want to put that all on him. But again, we're sitting here with a losing record. We missed the playoffs. You got to look at somebody, right? I mean,
yeah. Again, Brandon. A lot of people brought this argument up to me, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. You talking about Ty Sombrilo and David Quisenberry? Because that's who started most of the year at tackles for us in 2020, where Taylor Lewan tore his ACL and was out most of the season. So we didn't really have a great line. We had a better line than we do right now.
Absolutely.
But again, Tim Kelly's line scheme's terrible. So how much can we really place on the line, and how much, I mean, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, and again, the best offensive coordinators in this league work with what they've got. They're not the ones going out and drafting players. They're not the ones doing scouting. Their job, I mean, they might do a little bit, but their main focus is, these are the players I have. This is what we're good at. This is what we're going to do. And I just feel like it got off to a rough start, and there was just no change. There was no adaptation. There was no, well, let's try this. Now, I know we moved a lot of pieces around on the offensive line, but it got to a point where it's like, gosh, just let them get some reps together. I know it was bad, but they never really gave that line a chance to mesh and get good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man. I don't know. It just seemed like whoever they put at left tackle was just doomed for failure. But another good thing I brought up was, to a regular person that doesn't know that much about football, you might think that Peter Skoronski wasn't a good draft pick, because the offensive line has been terrible for the Titans this year. But when you try to help the guy on your left or the guy on your right, and both times you try to help those guys, the other guy gets completely blown up and ends up in a sack. I mean, you're kind of darned if you do and darned if you don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and just to build on that, I feel like, yes, we saw that on the line. I feel like we also saw that a lot in the secondary position this year, where I feel like Amani Hooker could have had a much bigger productive year had our cornerbacks been able to hold up in coverage a little better.
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like he was having to go out and cover for a lot of the corners because they're getting beat so consistently. So it's the same thing. It's got to work in unison. You've got to be able to play off each other, and it just never felt like this personnel was able to do that this year. And I feel like that's a lot. Like, we always talk about the 7 losses by 7 points or less. that's not a personnel issue. Now, I know that they weren't as talented as they could have been, but that point to me, that points to coaching, in my personal opinion. It's where guys are supposed to be. It's the run schemes. It just feels like to me this team could have possibly made the playoffs had coaching been a little bit better in those 7 games.
Yeah, look, man, that's another thing I wanted to talk about was how much does coaching actually affect an NFL team?
Yep.
So if you take a bunch of good players and you put them with great coaches, they can turn good players into great.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot take average players and turn them into elite players.
Agreed.
Which is, I think, what a lot of people expect from good coaches. However, you should see development through the season.
Absolutely.
You should see better numbers as you get closer to the end of the season, especially if it's their first season with the team.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm being honest, we're just not seeing that. I mean, other than this last game, because let's be real, Derrick Henry and D-Hop played harder in this game than they have all season.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yep.
It's just facts. So without that, how much do we really score? How much do we move the ball? If D-Hop doesn't make 2 or 3 of those amazing catches that he made.
Yep. 2 one-handed catches.
Yeah.
Yep.
If Ryan, I'm just saying, if that doesn't go that way, how different is the outcome of this?
Yep. Absolutely.
We're sitting here talking about being winless in the division.
It was a very real possibility. I mean, I was nervous. I don't know, without those plays, without that personnel, I feel like this whole season just turns out. I mean, there's so many things you can point to of, okay, this is why we won, but this is why we could have lost, or this is why we lost, but this is why we could have won. It just never seemed to click. And that's my biggest problem with this team. And we say it every single week. It's consistency. It's just consistency. Consistent teams win football. It's that simple. If you're able to go out there and do the same thing every week and put up numbers every week and find the right scheme every week, you're going to win football games. And we see the best teams do it. And here's the other thing that gets me is the best teams in the league right now, Baltimore Ravens, San Francisco 49ers, heck, the Eagles before they went through this drought. The issue that gets me with them is every game looks a little bit different. Now, they still have the same personnel. They still have roughly the same scheme. They're a passing team or more of a run-first team. But the problem that gets me is they make adjustments. And that right there, that commit. They make adjustments game to game. They make adjustments half to half. They make adjustments play to play. And that's what's killed me about this Titans team this year. I've just seen no adjustments, and I've seen no consistency.
That's what makes or breaks great teams. Not good teams, but great teams.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it with the Philadelphia Eagles right now.
Absolutely.
They've got some great talent on that team, but now their scheme is starting to be seen for what it is, and people are starting to figure out how to shut it down. And, oh, crap.
Well, you've also, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but I'd be mad at myself if I didn't. I think you've also got some toxicity on that team. And as much as I hate losing A.J. Brown, I don't know that he'd be a good fit here with Will Levis. I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't think I want A.J. Brown with a rookie quarterback. That's just
I will say that I feel like DeAndre Hopkins was a much better fit.
Absolutely.
Than A.J. just based on his
attitude.
AJ Brown's prima donna, attitude.
Yep. Yeah. And I know I said last week, sometimes you need a little bit of a diva, but what you can't have is a cancer in the locker room. And there's a very fine line between being a diva and being a social media star, and then just absolutely talking trash about your guys to the media. I mean, there is a very, very fine line. And I don't want to get too deep on that, but it's just something I thought of. I would much rather have DeAndre Hopkins on this team than A.J. Brown. Not to say that he's better or he's a better fit, but I just feel like for Levis and who he is, he doesn't need that type of person in the locker room with him. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and Brandon brings up another good point here, talking about first half to second half. Man, this was the exact same thing we were talking about last offseason, and why we wanted Todd Downing gone so bad.
Yeah.
Was because he had no adjustment at halftime.
Yep.
And I hear people telling me that I'm crazy for wanting Arthur Smith and stupid for not wanting Tim Kelly to stay on the team. Now, look, I'm not going to be really like crybaby about it if Tim Kelly stays as our offensive coordinator,
Mhm.
but I definitely think there are better offensive coordinators and better fits for the Titans than Tim Kelly. Now, am I going to list those off for you? No. Because if none of them land, then I look like a big idiot.
Exactly.
But I'm just saying that I don't feel like Tim Kelly's the best one out there. I feel like
agree.
there's better ones than Tim Kelly.
Yep.
And
I mean, we're talking about Arthur Smith. I mean, that's just one name right there. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but just when you look at personnel and the way that they fit, I mean, that's just the first obvious one that comes to mind. And I know it's easy for us to sit here and say that because he's been here before and he had more success, but just him as a coordinator, just him in that position, I just feel like it was more well put together. But I agree. I don't want to start throwing names out at this point in the season. And until Tim Kelly's gone, he's here. I mean, we've just got to accept that fact. And that kind of goes back to Vrabel and how much he's willing to give up to remain the head coach here. So until something happens, at that point, we'll discuss it and talk about who could possibly be some good fits. But man, just gear up, because if Vrabel stays, I don't know how different this coaching staff looks next year.
Yeah, I'll say it's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody get buckled in
Yeah.
for the next 2 months. It's going to be very interesting as a Titans fan.
Yep.
Everything could change in the next 2 months, fellas.
Yep.
Folks. So enough talk about that. We're going to try to stop talking about depressing stuff and maybe talk about some optimistic stuff looking towards our future.
Yep.
Next week, we're going to be doing pretty much, offensive, defensive, rookie grades and stuff like that. Free agency acquisitions, grades, all that stuff. We're going to be wrapping up the season, basically. But this week, Buddy Link, last show, said, we should grade Levis. And I was like, you're right, we should. And we had way different views then, and I think we still have way different views now.
Yeah, I think so. You want to start or you want me to start? Totally up to you. Because I'm going to get a lot of hate for mine. I'll go ahead and tell y'all it's going to be a lot of hate coming towards me. We'll start with me. That way you can make everybody happy.
Yeah, I'll end with the positive one. For it.
Let's do it that way. My grade for Will Levis this year, I'm actually leaning more towards a C+ to B-. And there's some reasons behind that. I feel like, yes, he's only as good as the weapons, the talent, the line that he had to work with. However, I've just seen some things that I wouldn't even say concern me, but I know I know he's a rookie. I get it. But to me this year, and this is where I'm going to pick up a lot of hate, to me right now, he looks like a better version of Tannehill with a stronger arm and a higher ceiling. My concern, and the coaching staff has a little bit to do with my grade on him, my concern is the development. He's such a emotional player, and he hasn't let that get to him yet. But we saw him when he got that injury. He was mad to go out of the game. At some point, he's got to realize, I've got to do what's best for the team. And I know he thinks that at certain points he is what's best for the team, but he's just got to start to learn things a little bit better. He's got to start to read defenses a little bit better. One knock on him coming out of Kentucky was accuracy. And we've seen a lot of times this year, there's a lot of passes that he's thrown that should have been interceptions. Now you can argue, well, they weren't interceptions, but how much of that is on him versus the DBs for not touching the ball? So I feel like if those interceptions happen, it's a different conversation. If I were grading if I were grading his talent level and his future and what he could be in his ceiling, I'm giving him an A- to maybe even an A. If I'm grading him on what I've seen this year, even behind this line and with this receiving core, I can't go over a B-. I just need to see more. It's not that I don't want him here. He's the quarterback next year, and I'm in full support of it. I just need to see more earlier next year so that I can see that development and show me that he's able to develop.
All right.
Yeah.
I understand. And you're right. The interceptions is an issue. It was the very first thing I talked about was his dangerous throws.
Yeah.
He puts it in danger's way a lot, and he fits it into tight windows a lot.
He can. He has the ability to. Yes,
Well, that's a two-way street,
exactly.
because sometimes you do fit it into those tight windows.
Yep.
Sometimes you miss those windows.
Yep.
They become interceptions. However, like you pointed out, they did not catch it.
Exactly. Yep.
And if they had, absolutely right, it would be a completely different conversation. However, they didn't. So that stat line doesn't go there.
Okay.
I give Will Levis an A-.
Okay.
And a lot of it goes on a curve,
Mhm.
basically for rookies, because Will Levis is a rookie. And we have to realize, we can't really compare him to, like, let's say Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, because,
True.
if you're grading him on that, well, then he's already done better in his rookie season than Peyton Manning. We can't grade him on Tom Brady's rookie season because he didn't play when he was a rookie. But point is if you ask me, quarterbacks don't come full circle till the third year. That's their magic year. That's pretty much the magic year for just about everybody, unless you're a skill position, which you can break out in your rookie or second year.
Right.
But for quarterbacks, usually your third. So the fact that he is pulling off these kind of stats as a rookie just flat impressed me to no limits.
Yep.
So I'm just going to run over a couple of them. I'm not going to bore you guys with a bunch of stupid stats. But the big highlight points for me was 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Again, completely different story if it's like 8-8 or 8-10. We're having a whole different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterback rating 84.2. Pretty darn good. He did fumble twice, and he did lose 2 fumbles. So that's not great. However, he's also the gutsiest player on the field when he takes the field.
I agree with that.
When he broke out of the Bradley Chubb sack and then folded Jalen Ramsey in half,
Absolutely.
I was impressed.
Yep.
Not only by the physicality of that, but just the mentality of that.
Yep.
Of I will this team, literally will this team to a first down or to a touchdown or whatever I need to do. I will go there.
Yep.
And really, it was just a show for everybody on the team that I am your man. I'm your general. I got this.
Yep.
He's an intense leader, and I'm extremely excited about his play, to be honest. First start, 4 touchdowns. Did you know in that game, 3 of them traveled over 50 yards in the air?
It's impressive.
Even
he's
though
got the arm talent for sure.
Yeah. Even though it was a 33-yard, a 47-yard, and a 61-yard respectively, they all traveled over 50 yards in the air.
Yep.
So his air time is amazing.
Yep.
He had 6 total this season, by the way. 6 total passes that traveled over 50 yards in the air.
Yeah.
That's, guess what? Guess what ranking that makes him in the NFL?
Ooh. I may be real generous here, but I'd say 5th or 6th.
Number 1, baby.
Really?
Number 1 in the NFL.
Fair enough.
Not only that, he averaged 10.6 air yards per pass for the season.
Yep.
That's a first down every time he lets go of the ball, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. It's true.
And I proved the point earlier about Levis and Hopkins versus Tannehill and Hopkins. It's not even really that good of a comparison.
Yep.
I mean, the yardage and the receptions are kind of close, but the touchdowns aren't. And that's what really counts, is it not? Points on the scoreboard.
Well, and that's what I talk about, and not to get back into it, but that's what I talk about every week with Henry. Do you want Derrick Henry to pad his stats, or do you want to win football games? I mean, it's the same situation, 100%.
Yeah, look, I love seeing Derrick Henry make all his stats, and I love seeing DeAndre Hopkins make all his bonuses and all that good stuff. But really, at the end of the day, I want to see a winning football team,
absolutely,
deep in the playoffs, contending for a bowl.
Yep. And I will say this. I think Levis still gives you the best chance to do that. And that's including, and I'm not even necessarily talking about just next year. I'm looking at 4 or 5 years down the road. I think he still gives you the best option to do that. And I don't care if Tom Brady came out of free agency tomorrow, if he decided to come out of retirement and go into free agency and I had a chance to go get him, I don't know if I'd take him. I think I still like Levis and what his potential is, if I'm being completely honest. Now, with that being said, I feel like he's just got to work on those accuracy a little bit. And a lot of that's just training camp. It's just reps. It's working with his receivers. So if I had to give him a little bit of extra credit, I guess I could move him B- to B. And again, I think the potential is there. I think the ceiling is super high. The only thing I'm worried about is him being, again, it's just him being held back a little bit. I want him to have a good quarterback coach. I want him to have a good head coach that supports him. And if that's Vrabel, great. Absolutely great. If it's not, you've got to make a decision now on who this team is going to be in 5 years. You've got to start looking at that and making that decision now. So we'll see. I really think he's got it. And again, his talent, the ceiling, I'd almost give him an A. I just need to see the development in this offseason.
And honestly, that is the thought we will leave you with.
Absolutely.
Is Mike Vrabel and the current staff
Yep.
best for developing Will Levis and the future of the Tennessee Titans?
Amen.
Man, that's a heck of a way to end the show.
Yeah.
You got anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good. Just remember, if these aren't talks that are happening in that front office right now, they're not talking about the right stuff. So we'll see what happens. But no, I'm good. Great show. Great talking to you guys as always. And I'll let Maximus tell you where to find him at.
Yeah, man. As always, you guys should know, if you're looking for the Titans Global Podcast, you can find it pretty much anywhere you get your social media. TikTok, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Facebook. And, of course, YouTube, which is where we want you to follow us. Like and subscribe, please.
Absolutely.
And, as always, if you want to follow me, you can find me, Maximus Titan Fan, on Facebook or Twitter. Link, where can they find you at?
You can find me at Twitter or on Twitter at Link Rogers. You can find me on Facebook with the same name. Love talking to you guys. Come slam me about how my grade for Levis is way too low. I love conversation. I want y'all to have your own opinions. I want you to tell me why I'm wrong because, hey, I'm not set in my ways. I've changed my mind a lot, and if you can't change your mind, you're not thinking about things the right way. But you can find me there. Come check it out. Come send me a message, and we'll see you then.
Yeah, that's another thing I want to say real quick before we roll, because you just brought up a great point. But me and another dude went round and round today about Arthur Smith. We literally tweeted each other probably 20 times back and forth today.
There you go.
And at the end of the day, we're following each other.
That's right.
That's what you call good football conversation, people.
Absolutely.
Bring it. And until we see you next week, actually, let me make another quick announcement. Friday, it looks right now like we're going to be not having our normal show. We're going to be on the Titans Coliseum podcast.
Yep.
So come check us out there. You'll hear more news about that throughout the week. Until then,
Tighten up.
Peace out.